Welcome to the Westminster News podcast. Michael Heaver here. It has been too long. Finally, speaking again to me old mucker Martin Daubney. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, Michael. I'm doing well, and it's great to see you. It's been a long time since we've actually met in person. It'd be great to have a beer soon, matey. But look, we've got some great stuff to talk about today, and I'm really excited that we're actually doing this via Zoom. I think we've all got used to doing this now, and it's a great way of communicating during the lockdown and beyond, and more power to it.
Absolutely. So, guys, of course, we're available to you on the usual podcast channels, but on YouTube now, you will be able to watch me, Martin, and other guests. I mean, quite why you'd want to look at my ugly mug, I don't know, but there you go. You've got the option. So, isn't technology wonderful? Now, the first thing I want to go into today is a new report out today, Martin, about academic freedom in danger at British universities as staff self-censor. Martin, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, it's made the front page of the Times today. It's absolutely no surprise to me that people hide their political views. But I want to be pedantic, Michael. You know me, I can be pedantic. And that is this. What does right wing even mean anymore? Because let's face it, right wing basically means shorthand for Hitler. Let's be honest. If you don't agree with the mainstream political narrative, then you are painted as an extremist. Now, if you include, we've all done those surveys online. Are you right wing or not? And basically, if you are concerned about immigration, which the vast majority of Britons are, if you voted for Brexit, which the majority of Britons did, then you are right wing. Now, that came as a shock to me, Michael, because I've always come from a political left background. 5 million Labour voters voted to leave, and suddenly we're all right wing. You're all right wing if you don't agree with this orthodoxy, which is impregnated, by the way, the Times. It's impregnated the BBC. It's impregnated politics. It's certainly impregnated academia. This comes as no surprise to me. When you dig into the detail of this, Michael, it's actually quite chilling. 9% of academics in the social sciences. I mean, I think we've got too many universities, too many tin pot degrees, too many Mickey Mouse polytechnics. But 1/3 of these people wouldn't hire a leaver. So when it comes down to job interviews, well, bear in mind that leavers are already in a vast minority. They won't be hired anyway. And so we have a sort of self-propagating system where people who actually believe the majority of public opinion are a tiny minority in university campuses.
Yeah, so this is a policy exchange report, and basically what it talks about is the paper's entitled Academic Freedom in the UK, and they suggest that there's a structural discriminatory effect against the minority of academics at British universities. A YouGov poll of 820 both current and former academics found that more than 1 in 7 said there was a hostile climate towards people with their political beliefs in the department, but the figure is higher among those who identify as right-leaning or among those who voted to leave the EU. Just over half of respondents said they would feel comfortable sitting with a colleague who was a Leave supporter at lunch, in a meeting or in the staff room. I mean, the thing is with academia, and I've come into this a little bit when I was at uni, because I loved it, as you know, I love intellectual tear-up, Martin. I've never backed down from that. I've rowed with many lecturers and students. I love the debate. But here's a fundamental point for me. If you've got an academic system whereby those at universities are afraid to say certain things, then what is the point of them at all? Sure, that the entire point of having universities and academics out there is to probe, is to debate, is to put out new ideas and scrutinise those out there. If you've actually got a system now in Britain where a significant proportion of those who perhaps support Brexit and consider themselves right-leaning don't even feel like they can say what they believe, then really, what is the point of it whatsoever? Because it defeats the entire purpose, does it not? And as I said, it's interesting to see this, because I certainly, anecdotally, feel like people I've talked to over the years, they certainly feel as if certain opinions, you just can't say them. Now, as I said, I think people need to be a bit more assertive in their opinions. Actually, I mean, ultimately, Martin, I get it from the angle of if it's going to cost you your career in university. But in terms of getting, oh, I might get a bit of criticism, I do think people need to harden up a bit, because actually, what you'll find is it will be the same group of Muppets that whine about everything who whinge about this sort of stuff as well. It's all the same. They all hide behind pathetic nicknames on Twitter. They all have absolutely no lives whatsoever, and their favourite pastime is moaning. And actually, I think once you accept and price that in to what you say, there's going to be a contingent of absolute Muppets who want to whinge and criticise. Then perhaps you can be more assertive and free speaking. But of course, when that crosses over actually into, wow, this could cost me my career at a university potentially, then it becomes, as you say, much more sinister, because you're then talking about a form of censorship which really goes against everything that should be the lifeblood of universities, which is open and frank debate.
Yeah, and a lot of those Muppets, Michael, spend a lot of their time, perhaps too much of their time, talking to people like yourself and myself. But we love their attention because it shows that we're winning. But look, you might say, on the one hand, Michael, well, bloody students, what's it matter? They're just droning on in the university bar, having their soy lattes. But the point is this: these people go on to run the country. They go on to run government. They certainly go on to control the media. They go on to control the civil service, police commissioners. Serious positions of power are channeled through academia. And if they're imbibed, and teachers, right back to the beginning, if they're imbibed in this politic from the very start of Brexit is insidious, you're a right winger, you're evil if you care about immigration, which most people do. And that's a problem, because our next generation will be taught this same rot. And when you look at actually who's behind this, Trevor Phillips co-wrote this study. I think Phillips is one of the most brilliant academics out there. He's the truth sayer. He's not afraid to offend people. And he's had a really pertinent point, Michael, in this, and that is, no one fought for diversity and inclusion in order to create universities staffed by a faculty who may look representative, but are to all intents and purposes intellectually identical robots. And here's the point: diversity is much deeper than skin. The way we look, the way we present ourselves might appear, oh, let's have a checkbox of BAME inclusivity. What about what's between your ears? If you don't think like most people, then you don't represent the populace, and they are dictating what our children are taught. I think, Michael, this is a really important report. We should shine a really bright light on it.
Yeah, and I just want to finish on this point, because you picked out that great quote from Phillips there. The one that really I found pretty disturbing was the university minister, Michelle Donnellan, saying, she's been quoted as saying, it is deeply concerning the extent to which students and academics with mainstream views are being silenced and discriminated against in our universities. That's the universities minister. I mean, that is something out of a tin pot republic. The fact that students and academics feel suppressed. And actually, this isn't something, because I actually think this is getting worse. It's one of those issues that actually, you can see it year by year, the people's sense of freedom of speech and what they feel they can and can't say, it's being clamped down on. So this is actually sort of a problem that's getting worse. And of course, it's one of those issues that the people that went out and voted Conservative and gave Boris Johnson that chunky majority are actually going to want to see some actual fight back on. Because at the end of the day, whether it's a electorate who's far left Corbynista or an ardent Brexiteer, as a student and as a society, we should want to hear what they've got to say. That is the entire point of democracy. It's the entire point of academia. And as soon as you lose that, you become a less free country, which is a very bad thing indeed.
Completely agree, but there was a really important word that you just mentioned there, Michael, and that's mainstream. If mainstream views are now being painted by academics as extremist views, we've got a major disconnect, because most people are law-abiding, patriotic, proud to be British. They voted Brexit, they're concerned about immigration. All of these socially conservative issues are actually very, very mainstream. Yet, we have it being portrayed here as some form of extremism, intolerance, and we've got a problem. And they're talking about quotas for academics. How do we sort this out, Michael? Do we go through a sort of job interview system where we need more Brexiteers? Because the BBC is saying we need more BAMEs. How about academics need more Brexiteers?
Well, I certainly look. I remember when I was at sixth form as a fresh-faced young Brexiteer, and when I was at university, and that wasn't. I mean, that wasn't that long ago. It was quite a few years ago, I suppose. But you know, the idea of if you said I think Britain should leave the EU back then. I mean, that then was seen as quite an extreme view. I mean, God knows what it was like for Nigel Farage in the 1990s. People must have looked at him like they had three heads. But it's interesting to see again, and we've talked about this a bit before in the media, the disconnect between, as you say, what seemed to be a commentariat slash left-wing academic extreme view versus mainstream British public opinion. Mainstream British public opinion, of course, was that we wanted to leave the EU. Mainstream British public opinion is that we should control our borders and that we should slash immigration. Mainstream British public opinion is that we should, you know, in terms of universities and things like that, we should be having different ideas that are free to be debated and discussed. And as I said, this is something now the Conservative government are going to have to look at, because it is simply not acceptable as a country to have a system where academics feel like they can't speak out. It's ludicrous. It's tin pot republic, you know, banana republic stuff. And I hope that this report goes some way to actually showing that urgent action needs to be taken on this.
Michael, you're making me feel great. You're making me feel really good listening to this. Mate, crack on.
Well, I have that effect, you know. Now, the next thing I want to talk about, Martin, were you offered a peerage? Were you on the list, mate?
I don't think I'll ever get through that. I think we've been a little bit too outspoken. Although looking at this list, there is some reason to hope, Michael.
Yeah, very interesting. So our old Brexit Party MEP colleague Claire Fox, one of those going in to the Lords. Kate Hoey, that Brexit hero, former Labour MPs like Frank Field and Gisela Stewart, Nigel Dodds from the DUP. So it's certainly, in some ways, a more balanced list than we've had in previous years. Of course, we've also got the likes of Ken Clarke and Philip Hammond going in. So this isn't a pure Brexiteer list, but there are certainly some people there who have been absolute staunch Brexit heroes. But, you know, Martin, what it comes back to with this is the House of Lords increasingly is looking slightly ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, the size of it, the fact that it's done in this way. I mean, surely the time has come to have an elected second chamber.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, it was really interesting. I was messaging Foxy over the weekend when it was announced on Friday. I was like, do we have to curtsy now, Foxy? Do we have to tug our forelock? You know Claire Fox, Michael, you know, a great friend of ours in the bars in Brussels and Strasbourg. And the thing is that Twitter went into meltdown because they always had a problem with Claire as being a former member of the Revolutionary Communist Party, who then became a Brexiteer. I was at that press conference, the first one in London, where Claire was announced with Nigel alongside him, and she was very critical of Nigel's politics in terms of they didn't really have lots to stand by except the key issue of Brexit. Back to our previous story, if you agree on key principles, then you can forget about the fripperies. You can join together and form a movement. And isn't it brilliant that Claire Fox was a turkey voting for Christmas, just like yourself, Michael, just like myself. We wanted our jobs to end. Claire has been a very outspoken critic of the House of Lords. She wants to abolish it, and now she's going to be draped in the ermine, and she'll be in there trying to abolish it twice. She'll be a turkey for Christmas. Michael, I think it's a joyous decision that you can get a Trojan horse in there like her, and they know her political standpoint. This won't come as any surprise to them. She's going to go in there, cause mayhem. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're looking for an advocate of someone in that place who's then going to make the democratic argument as to why there needs to be urgent reform of it and a entirely new system, then Claire Fox, I imagine, is going to make some quite powerful speeches. But I agree with you. It was delicious to see some, again, that, you know, just people absolutely losing their minds. How dare you put in prominent Brexiteer? And, you know, it's very funny as well. Those who cheered on the Lords for many years when it was getting stuffed almost exclusively by pro-EU grandees, suddenly now are much more sceptical of the Lords and have suddenly have a problem with it, which just shows you how ludicrous some of these people are. I mean, I've been damn consistent on this. I think the Lords needs to be abolished, but having a voice in there like Claire Fawkes, having the common sense of people like Kate Hoey in there is going to make it better. And I hope Fox is successful in terms of her foray into the Lords and getting it abolished as us Brexit Party MEPs were in the European Parliament.
Yeah, totally agree. And Kate Hoey as well, a real pioneer from my political background of that Labour vote that went Brexit, gave many people out there, I think, permission to sort of secretly, agree along those political lines. So it's great to see, actually a representative political body go in there. That's Ken Clarke, ultra Remainer, Hammond, ultra Remainer, Ian Botham slipped in there, and that again has annoyed quite a few people. They all say, well, it's because of his Brexit allegiances. Well, he is also an awesome cricketer who generated millions for charity. But at least we have a representative House of Lords, although I'd like to see the whole thing made, I'd like to see the whole thing abolished, Michael, as you would.
Yeah, and I will just say as well on Kate Hoey, I mean, you talk, if you were someone that wants to look in politics at someone who really stood by their principles when it had been far easier not to, Kate Hoey is one of the shining examples, because the amount of stick that she must have taken within the Parliamentary Labour Party when she was a Labour MP for not only, not being a sort of a quiet voice on Brexit. She was out there, she was at the rallies, she was campaigning at the forefront. All, very few Labour MPs had the bottle to do that. And she is someone who's an absolute shining light that you can go into politics and stay true to your principles if you've got the bottle, if you've got the honour to do it properly. And as I said, I think it'll be interesting to see some of her speeches in that place.
Yeah, there is one slightly cynical part of me, Michael, that thinks the House of Lords is a great way of silencing the most outspoken critics. Like, here we are approaching the Brexit endgame. I still have reservations about things like fishing, the level playing field, where we're actually going to get. Will there still be room for a new political movement down the line if we don't get this done? And are people like Fox, people like Hoey, are they being put into the chambers of the House of Lords to keep them quiet? That's just my cynical side, Michael. As you know, I'm not a natural cynic. I'm a glass half full merchant, but still, it's a great move for Fox and a great move for Hoey. Well done to them. Beautiful.
Now, an issue that I know people care about, but has got very little mainstream media coverage, it's something we're going to keep highlighting on Westminster on the Westminster News podcast, is illegal migration by the Channel on small boats. On Friday, another 9 boats. We saw since the 12th of July now, 89 boats and over 1,000 individuals making that crossing in the month of July alone. And around 3,500 reached the UK in over 250 small boats this year so far. Martin, it's a damn dangerous situation. Obviously, Nigel Farage has been out there showing the system that's going on. It's onto coaches, it's into hotels. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've been looking at the figures that the Home Office have been sending out, and on some days you're talking upwards of 20 boats. This is dangerous. Human traffic scumbags are making a lot of money. And I'm afraid it's a problem that I keep going on about it because it's escalating. The problem is getting worse and it needs dealing with.
Yeah, and it's almost back to our first story here, and that is, if you're concerned about this, which the vast majority of the British population are, then you are still portrayed as some form of racist, xenophobic, small-minded extremist. But that's not the case. And we have to be resolutely clear. I know we mentioned this many times on the Westminster News podcast, and it's this. This industry is underpinned by the most depraved, slave-like exploitation of vulnerable people on the planet. And we hear the sob stories of unaccompanied children, which are a tiny minority actually of the actual people who come on boats. They're always often men of working age. who are sent over. If they are unaccompanied children, they are a spearhead to allow the rest of the family to come. And we cannot ever forget the point that these people have come through 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 countries before the UK, yet they're risking their lives in dinghies, kayaks, shambolic makeshift sea craft to try and get here. And that's for a very good reason. And that is, we offer great benefits. We offer a welcome home. You're practically chaperoned in. As soon as you get onto waters in France, you become a British problem. Now, why aren't the French actually dealing with their side of the channel and taking people back? And then you're very, very unlikely to be deported once you're here. So it has to be said that the UK is still seen as a meal ticket, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for this awful, awful trade. And it's not an extreme view to oppose this. It's actually the decent thing to do, Michael.
Yeah, it's interesting to see Tony Smith, the former head of UK Border Force, saying that the UK and France need to agree a treaty with a joint patrol, whereby migrants picked up in the Channel can be returned to France to have asylum claims considered there. He said, if you want to come to the UK, they need to, if they want to come to the UK, they need to make their case on the French side. And if they're found in the waterways or even make it as far as Dover, we say, I'm sorry, but you go back there and that's where you'll be interviewed and processed on the French side. I would note this as well, Martin. Obviously, I've had correspondence with the Home Office to get these figures and get them out there. The government line on this and the government language on this is hardening. They're basically saying that the current rules are not fit for purpose. They're being abused by activist lawyers to stop deportations. We know that the latest set of figures, only 6% of illegal migrants who came through this route are actually ever deported. And the government basically saying that at the end of the year, when we come out of the transition period, we'll be able to change the situation. Of course, the problem with that is that, are we really going to sit back for months more now and watch this problem continue to escalate in this extremely dangerous way? I think that's completely unacceptable. And interesting as well, by the way, that the Calais MP last week basically saying that a lot of these people in Calais, in that area, don't want to claim asylum in France. They would rather get to the UK. So big changes are needed on this. And as I said, the government are hardening what they're saying. They're saying there are going to be changes and the current set of rules are not fit for purpose. And we know that Home Secretary Priti Patel says the right things. But again, what matters here is delivery. And it's not really acceptable just to sit here for months on end now and say, oh, well, that's the situation, we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And while it's great to hear this kind of hardening of political language, the rhetoric is certainly making all the right noises, when are we going to actually see, I think, Michael, a huge opportunity with leaving the European Union is to look at that money that we currently give away in fishing quotas to European Union, many to like France and Spain. Can we charge them quotas to make money from them? So allow them to continue fishing, but use that money to reinvest. And a great way to reinvest is in our coastal defences. Ships across the Channel, escort them back. I would like to see something akin to Australia. I know I talk about this often on the Westminster News podcast, Operation Sovereign Waters. Intercept, return, contain, process, deport. Don't let them into the UK, because the moment they're here, the human rights lawyers will ensure that they remain, and we can't deport, and we're currently powerless. So Priti Patel is making all the right noises, but I still think we're not there. We're not doing what we should be doing, and that is protecting our borders and being an independent, sovereign nation. After the end of this year, Michael, glass half full.
In terms of protecting, Martin, we need to start protecting our police officers. I mean, I just cannot believe, guys, I cannot believe what is going on in London at the moment, and it's getting virtually no coverage. So last week, a police officer hit by a car in West London. The incident occurred in Uxbridge on Wednesday, following a report that suspects were breaking into a house. A local officer attended the scene in plain clothes and was struck by a car. He suffered a broken ankle and was taken to hospital to recover. Now, in July as well, there have been 2 police officers in London stabbed, and as I just noted, a police officer hit by a car. And whenever I post this, it's unbelievable to me that this rising tide of violence and serious violence, stabbings, being hit by a car, this is going on in our capital. Of course, obviously, we saw scores of officers injured during violent protests in London. And yet, when I posted these stories, mine, have you heard any? Has there been a single TV report about either of the two police officers that have been stabbed in London in July? Not a dicky bird. I mean, what is going on here?
Well, it's a really interesting phenomenon, this. I spoke to Norman Brennan last week for the Westminster News podcast, a really, really fascinating guy.
Yeah, great interview.
Thank you. He's out there on Twitter. Here's a guy, 31 years in the police force, on the front line. He was stabbed, almost died. He knows what he's on about. And he's talking to police officers, rank and file coppers all the time, putting all his information out there. And undeniably, there is a huge mood, I think, a movement of negativity towards the police. You talk about things getting reported. Now, that's one thing. But where's the opinion pieces? Like the moment a black driver gets stopped, the Olympic athlete we saw, that was a news cycle for 2 days, Michael. The racial profiling, that's a big story. But 2 coppers stabbed, stopping and searching, it gets reported factually, but where's the opinion about this being horrific? Where's the opinion about who's got the backs of our coppers? Where's that surging opinion? The truth is, it's out there on social media, but it's not in the mainstream press. And I think we've got a real problem with the media backing movements that are anti-police and not having the backs of the thin blue line. We've got a real problem, Michael.
Yeah, I believe one of those stabbings in London on a police officer was during a stop and search. But it just amazed me that was not a bigger story. If we get into a stage in our society where police officers are being stabbed, and I said, if it was once a year, this is twice in the capital in 1 month, and as I said, another police officer hit by a car, and that comes after those violent protests where scores of police officers were injured. And I just think it's a situation that should disturb all law-abiding citizens, because if police officers are getting attacked on a regular basis now, that is very, very bad, obviously, for the state of law and order in your country. And I just sense, from looking at what is going on, that there is a rising tide of violence that is not being sufficiently reported. I'll give you another example. I think we talked about it before, was knife crime. The latest set of knife crime figures, knife crime is now at record levels. It's 51% higher in the latest figures than it was in 2011. And it's disproportionately rising in London. Now, these might be things that are difficult to talk about and people want to sort of brush over. This is really important. This is the state of what is going on the streets in which people are having to live in this country. And continuing to duck it, because I think the reality is, the answer is to be a lot tougher when it comes to law and order. If you are caught with, and by the way, you should see the state of some of these blades that coppers are finding during stops and searches. These are not little pocket knives. These are whacking great big machetes. And it's very simple. Anyone caught with a weapon like that should be facing years in prison, no ifs, no buts. And I'm afraid we're very, very far from that. It slaps on the wrists, it's suspended sentences, and it's a very weak message going out. And I think it's very worrying indeed.
Yeah, I agree. And also, back to our first story of academia and self-selection out of the process. So if you get people who don't agree with academia or the current kind of prevailing wind, not even applying to be an academic, what about police? Who would apply to be a copper now when all you get is flack, all you get is abuse? Anytime there's any aggro, that there's 10 people filming it, and like nobody helping the police anymore. It's like, the public opinion feels very against the most important things in our society: immigration, academia, education, law and order. And until we kind of have a recalibration, I mean, look at America. It's absolute chaos in Portland, the election of Trump coming up. Law and order is absolutely central to winning elections, to democracy, to getting things done. Fostered and encouraged by the press, this anti-establishment, anti-authority, anti-police message is signal boosted. Whereas when our law and order officers are stabbed or assaulted, it's very, very rarely reported, apart from on the Westminster website, Michael.
Absolutely, guys. And look, we're going to keep talking about these sorts of issues that we know you care about. Thanks to you that have subscribed. If you want to support us, we're going to be doing another show, me and Martin, later in the week that's only going to be available if you go over to patreon.com/WestMonster UK. Go and support us. Thanks to those of you who have done so far. It's really important that you support Real News because, as I said, so many of these subjects you will just not see major coverage of elsewhere. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to those of you supporting us. If you head over, as I said, to patreon.com/WestMonster UK, we're going to have another show out later this week. Martin, I am sweating, mate. I'm going to go and have a nice cold drink, I think, to cool down. But guys, thanks a lot for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
Superb. Cheers, Brexiteers.
Cheers.